Hey there, my name is fhaekljf, and today I'll be ranking all Hollow Knight Silksong bosses. It's been about a week since the game came out by the time I'm recording this, and while I haven't 100% of the game, I've already encountered every single boss, and I thought it'd be fun to discuss them today. I wholeheartedly believe that Hollow Knight Silksong has much better bosses and boss design than Hollow Knight the original, and I think it mostly has to do with Hornet's moveset and how Hornet's able to react and move so fast compared to the bosses in Hollow Knight, and overall, I'm just excited today to talk more about this game and just think about it a little. A lot of the footage I'll use in this video isn't mine, mostly because I wasn't recording myself while playing this game, so any videos I borrow to demonstrate these bosses will be linked in the description below. Also, as a heads up, I played these bosses on my PC using my keyboard instead of a controller, so yeah, I'm one of those maniacs. I would love to fight these bosses in the future using a actual, a Nintendo Switch controller maybe, but most of the experiences that I'm about to talk about came from playing on keyboard. Obviously, there will be heavy spoilers for all the bosses in the game, so please be advised that from here on out, we're going to be talking about all the bosses. So if you haven't finished the game, click off, finish the game, come back when you're done. And I would like to point out right now that this is all purely based on personal opinion. This is what I believe, and this is how I felt during my first experience and any research I did afterwards about these bosses. If you have any other opinions, agree with me, disagree, etc., please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think about these bosses, and I'd just love to discuss more about this game. That being said, let's get into it. All the bosses right here are listed in the order they appear in the Hunter's Journal, and I made this tier list if you guys like to check it out for yourselves. Let's start with the first Moss Mother fight. So this really feels like a mix if the champion boss and the Grass Mother from the last game were combined into one, because on one side you don't really see any more difficult bosses from here until a little bit after, but on the other side this boss isn't too difficult. I think I'm gonna put it on C. I think this boss is fine for just being the first boss you encounter. It's pretty normal, average, nothing too crazy, nothing too hard, and overall, I mean, it was a fun experience to beat it and finish it first try. I'd also like to mention that I'm going to be talking about these bosses a lot based on their run back, so how difficult it was to die and then get back to this boss, also based on how many times I've died to these bosses. So for Mother 1, I didn't die a single time, and the run back is really short. There's a bench right next to it, which I heavily appreciate. I wish the champion boss from the last game had something like this. That said, right here we have Mother 2, which I do believe Mother 2 to be a better boss than the first Mother fight. I think the fact that you introduce two of them now instead of one makes it more challenging, as well as you guys already know about the spoilers from here on out, but in Act 3 of the game, when everything is all voided and whatnot, I actually fought these bosses and they become voided versions of themselves. I think you could encounter them earlier, however, I somehow missed out on that. So when I went back to fight them, I actually fought a voided version of these bosses, and I do believe that this also happens for a couple of other bosses that I can't list from the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure this happens as well. And the voided version of this boss is actually pretty fun, I'd say. I liked it a lot, and I think it's better than Mother. Nothing too crazy, but it is better than Mother. The run back is fine. I only died like twice. Actually, I died one time because I wasn't even expecting a fight, so I got caught off guard. But overall, it's a very solid, nice, fun fight, I'd say. Now we have Skull Tyrant 1. These two Skull Tyrant bosses really, I wouldn't say they feel like bosses per se. You know how in Hollow Knight you had those bosses, I'd say like Brooding Moloch, that are sort of like bosses but not really, or the sword guy you fight in Soul Sanctum before you get to the Soul Tyrant. They're kind of like bosses but not really. I mean, they sort of appear as bosses or whatnot. I assume this guy might appear in the pantheon of Farloom, so maybe. And as for both of them, I'd probably rank both of them in D tier, mostly because they're both pretty much the same exact fight. I did like the second fight more than the first one because of the impact it had, since you actually fight him like as soon as you land in the, what's it called, the bone area. He just comes out of nowhere and starts killing a bunch of people, and you're like, oh damn, it's actually getting real. Like there are consequences happening here. But regardless, they're both super simple bosses. If you die at these bosses, I feel bad because the run back is probably not too great, but I mean, I didn't die a single time fighting these guys, and they were pretty simple. On the other hand though, we have the first Savage Beastfly. Now this boss has caused a lot of pain in the community. I remember when I first encountered this boss right here, I was actually struggling myself. I will admit I died a couple of times. Now this will be a motif you will hear me talk about throughout the whole video, but I sincerely, wholeheartedly do not like bosses that summon other enemies as part of their gimmick. I feel like that's sort of cheating in a way, and I think that takes away from the one-on-one feel that you have going up against the boss. If you have to include enemies to make the boss harder, I kind of think that's on the boss design and not the boss itself. But because this boss deals 2 damage and 2 contact damage, and he summons a bunch of other enemies, one of them which could also deal 2 damage, it just becomes really overwhelming. However, it was extremely satisfying to beat this boss, and after I finally beat him, I was happy with myself, but he did take a lot of trouble off of me. The run back was, it wasn't that good, I'd say, but it could have been worse. And it was very funny because I remember playing this game and then thinking, wow, that boss kind of sucked. And then a day later I go on Twitter and TikTok and all sorts of social media and everybody was complaining about this guy. It was hilarious. So I'd rank him at C tier. And the reason I rank him at C tier is because he wasn't too bad. He took me a couple tries, but again, you're playing a Hollow Knight game, right? You're meant to lose a bunch of times so you could learn the mechanics of the game and be patient. That's what's most important here. And I'd say he succeeded in doing that. However, the second boss, in my opinion, is better than the first version of this boss. Now, why do I say that? Well, first off, you're fighting him in a arena-ish setting, which I think makes the boss harder because you could get dealt 2 contact damage by falling into the lava. He also removes the platforms by doing his stupid attacks, and the enemies he summoned, even though they're more annoying because they deal 2 damage as well, they're also kind of more interesting to fight with, I guess. Specifically because he always summons the same number of enemies and the same type of enemy rather than 2 enemies at a time and just different types of enemies in his first attempt. Overall, this boss did take me a little bit of trouble. The run back wasn't too bad, I'd say. There was like a bench right next to it. You just fall down, go right, and then fight him again. And it was funny because I actually watched a friend the other day try to struggle against this boss, but both of them actually. He was struggling against both of them, and it was pretty funny. Overall, I'd say it's better than the first one. I think I like it more. I wouldn't put it higher than Moss Mother, I think. I enjoyed Moss Mother more, but you know, these 2 guys, they aren't that horrible. Up next, we have the Bell Beast. Now, the Bell Beast is important because I'd say between Moss Mother and Savage Beastfly, I fought Bell Beast, and he was the first one that actually took off a life of me, I think, like a life or 2. It was pretty challenging is what I'm trying to say. The Bell Beast is very challenging because it deals 2 damage and it jumps all over the arena, and I don't remember much of this fight. All I remember was I had some fun. I was remembering a lot, thinking to myself, like, when is this guy gonna finally die, because I was attacking them so much. I think it was a decent fight. I'd put it probably like right here between these 2. I think I enjoyed this one more, but enjoyed it more than this one, so I'd put in between. Now we have the Forebrothers, Cygnus and Garmond. This is a very interesting fight, I'd say. That is certainly a way to put it. Now, I say this again because if I recall correctly, this boss does summon other enemies during its attacks, which, like I said, I'm going to repeat this a lot. I do not like this. I do not like when the boss summons other enemies during its attacks or whatnot. However, once the second brother gets introduced, he becomes the enemy, and you just sort of fight it out between each other, and I think that's really cool. I think this boss actually had some interesting design, I'd say, when it comes to its attack patterns. And overall, I liked how both brothers were pretty similar with their weapons, but they were also very unique in the way they used them. So I think I'm actually going to rank this in A tier. The run back, it was alright, right? Could have been worse, I'd say. And most of these bosses deal 2 contact damage, 2 mass damage, whatever you call it. It's gonna be pretty bad from here on out, but I like the boss. I put him in A. I think it was very fun to fight them, and especially because they're mandatory as well, you have to fight them to get the true ending. I think they were a fun experience. 4th, Chorus. This is a boss I was very much looking forward to because 4th Chorus was shown off during a lot of the trailers of the game, and I was excited to fight 4th Chorus. I will not lie, I was a little bit disappointed when I found out how easy this boss was, specifically because I beat it on my first try. This boss just felt a little too easy, its attacks were a little too obvious, but other than that, fourth course was pretty enjoyable. I could see some people struggling on him. I just wasn't one of them. I think because of how easy this boss was, I'd probably rank it at like high B tier. If he was any harder or just had anything that would make him, I guess, more unique in a way, I'd put him in A, but he's just too easy for me. Gurr the Outcast. Now this is another boss that caught me off guard, which I died to because I wasn't really expecting it. I was doing one of the mass challenges, or the wishes it was called, and I was looking for him, and then I just suddenly get trapped, and now I'm in the middle of fighting this guy, and I was like, wow, this is actually a really cool fight. This guy definitely feels like he's the traitor lord of the game in a way. I know I'm gonna make a lot of comparisons to Hollow Knight, the original, but stay with me here. This guy feels like the Traitor Lord fight in a way because he's an outcast, right? He's very big, masculine, just like Traitor Lord, and he's just going all around, throwing all these punches or whatever he was doing. I don't remember much of this fight actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I remember having fun fighting this fight, and for that, I'll place him in A tier because I think this boss is actually pretty interesting in the way he attacks, and I had fun fighting him, and once you fight him, you're like, wow, you know, that was actually kind of cool. And then we have Skarrsinger Karmelita. Now, I believe this boss was shown off a bit earlier in development of the game, and I don't remember that at all, so the first time I saw this boss was the first time I actually fought her. I wholeheartedly believe this might be the best boss fight in all of Hollow Knight and Silksong. I believe that this boss is truly incredible in almost everything it does. First off, right, I don't really like the arena thing that sometimes you have to do against bosses where you have to defeat a couple of enemies before getting to the boss itself, but it's only 2 waves, right? Or I think it was 3 waves. You just fight a couple of ants, then you fight the big ants that you don't fight anywhere else, just there, and then you fight her yourself, right? The first couple of waves, it's easy. You'll always get that through, and you'll most likely have a lot of silk and full health by the time you get to her. But her fight is incredible. I love the music of the fight. The run back isn't that bad. I died so many times. It almost took me 3 hours to beat this fight. You have to be extremely patient, extremely vigilant. You have to react really fast. You have to react super fast. You have to move all around the arena, make sure you don't get hit, avoid her saws. She deals double damage, I think, in almost everything except for contact damage, which is very nice. And the one complaint I'd say about this boss would be that maybe she has just too much health. This boss dragged on for a long time. But outside of that, I'd say this is probably my favorite boss in this game and my favorite boss from both games combined. For some context, my favorite boss from the original Hollow Knight is Lost Kin, mostly because I really like those boss fights where it's just a one-on-one and it's like against somebody who has a similar moveset to you, or against somebody who's like very similar to you in a way. So I really like the Lost Kin boss fight, even though he was a bit too easy. This boss fight right here, even if you had like full nail upgrade, full soul, full mask, you would still struggle against this boss, and that's something I really appreciate. I would love to fight her more in the Pantheons, and I just think she's amazing. If you pay attention to the arena you fight her, it's not even an arena, it's an opera house. I noticed somebody said that in the comment section of one of the videos against her that I was looking at, and they mentioned how like when you kill the ants, they don't say anything, and when you fight her, she's always singing, but when you knock her down, she stops singing, and it's because like you're in an opera house. And I just think that's really cool. I think they did so much right with this boss, especially the context leading up to it as well. And I'll say this right now, because you have to kill this boss and 2 other ones to get the pieces to like, you know, the hearts, so you could go get the true ending, reminded me a lot about the original Hollow Knight where you had to get the mass pieces from the Dreamers. And it's very similar because you're going to like a sort of memory world, like the dream world, and then fighting them. This might be a hot take, but I think that this is exactly what the dream bosses should have been in Hollow Knight. I think instead of just killing Monomon and Hera and Lurien, you were able to like fight them in some way, or just something like that. I would have loved to had what we had here against those bosses there, and I think that would have been really incredible. These bosses right here really feel like Team Cherry looked back at what they did in Hollow Knight with those 3 Dreamers, and we're like, alright, we need to step it up a bit, make them more challenging, make you actually have to go out of your way, more than going out of your way, right? You're already going out of your way to find these bosses, to fight the bosses that are guarding them, and now you have to go out of your way even more to finally get that reward you need to progress in the story. And I love what they did with these bosses. You'll hear me talk about this more when we get to the other ones as well, but I love what they did with these bosses. Alright, enough about her. We got Moorwing next. Now, a lot of people also hate this boss. As a matter of fact, this is one of the 2 bosses that if I recall correctly, are getting nerfed. A lot of people didn't like this boss because, I mean, to be fair, the run back isn't that bad, right? You just kind of run in a straight line, maybe get hit by an enemy or two on the way there, and then you fight him. But the boss has a couple of stupid quirks, I'd say. Especially the fact that here's another boss that deals 2 mass damage while you only have 5 mask, and I think that's really stupid. I can't remember if this boss summons any enemies. I don't think so, but even if it did, I still got annoyed a lot by this boss. Oh, and this boss can also attack off screen, I'm pretty sure, which is like a forbidden rule in Hollow Knight, I think. Like, if I played a lot of the Pantheons. I never beat Pantheon of Hollowness, but from what I noticed, every time I try to play or speedrun Hollow Knight, bosses never attack if they're not on screen. Unless it's a boss that like can attack you from anywhere no matter what. Usually they'd walk on screen first before they attack you. And if I recall correctly, this boss just doesn't do that whatsoever, and this boss is extremely annoying. If I'm being honest, it's not a skill issue, okay? I just think this boss wasn't that fun to fight against. I think he was pretty annoying, and for that, I just put him at the top of D tier. If I were to fight him again, I'd probably finish him in the first, second, maybe even third try, but I don't think he would be that fun to fight against Moss Mother. I prefer to fight a Moss Mother over him. Now the next boss is really interesting because when I fought him, I was confused to say the least. I thought he was going to at least summon more enemies or like show his true form or something. No, it's just a tree, I guess. Father of the Flame was one unique boss that caught me off guard. With a very unique moveset, I'd say. He only deals damage through like setting off his flames, and then once you set off all the flames by like pogoing on them, all the branches, you have to attack his core, and then its core starts setting off flames as well, and then like doing this random burst flame attack. At first I was struggling a lot with that attack, but then I realized you could just kind of pace around the arena and you'll get your way out of him. I mostly enjoy this boss per se because throughout the whole game I was using the Reaper's Crest. It was the first crest I found, and once I found it I never took it off because I loved everything about it. I love long range attacks. The first thing I did in Hollow Knight was grab Mark of Pride. Every time I speedrun that game I still killed the Bandit's Lords so I could get some Geo to buy the Lumafly Lantern, and so I could get the Mark of Pride because I barely can play that game without it. So having a crest that like allows you to attack far but also gives you an excellent down air attack, I think that crest was so good. I would like to play the game with some other crests, you know, mix and try out what the other ones feel like. But to me, the Reaper's Crest is my one and only true love in this game. And using that against Father of the Flame, it just works really well. There's only one problem I have with this boss, and it's that sometimes when I would pogo him, instead of double jumping, my float would come out, and that made it really annoying for times when I had to double jump to move out of the flame's way, but instead I would float and the flame would just come directly towards me. And at first, I thought this was mostly an issue with me. I actually searched it up to see if it was just a me thing, and I saw a couple of people talking about I think it has to do something with the background, and if like you collide with something else it just won't let you double jump. But I think I found out what it is. So if you double jumped or click the button twice while holding down, you just start floating. And I didn't know this till like really late in the game and way after beating this boss. So I think what was mostly happening is that I was pogoing, and then I guess I would hold the button and then I would try to like double jump, but because I'm holding down it makes me float instead of double jumping, which on one side I kind of like that because when I got the double jump I was a little annoyed that like I want to float instead of double jumping and it's making me double jump instead of floating. So we have that option now, but on the other hand I don't like the fact that we just never knew about this option at all, and it was kind of secret in a way, unless I just wasn't reading something. Maybe I wasn't. I spent way too long talking about this boss fight and most of it had nothing to do with the boss fight. I think it was a fun boss, very interesting, very unique. So I'd put this guy around like B tier. What is happening? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. I don't want to do that. As a matter of fact, let's rank this guy right now. I'd put him in high B tier over here. Crawfather. Now Crawfather is a very interesting boss. I've said that about most bosses here. but that applies the most here because Crawfather, you meet him during I think it's the Greymoor area. You have to get a ticket first, right, to fight him. You meet him in Greymoor, and then you have to fight a couple of different crows before getting to him. And I like that, like, the crows appear from the background and they disappear in the background and you actually fight him. And like I said before, not a big fan of having to defeat a couple enemies to actually get to the boss itself, but there are a few examples where I think that works pretty well, and I'd say Crawfather's one of them. This boss was fun to fight. I would say that there are a couple of bosses here which I think do need the enemies, like, you know how I said earlier that I don't like bosses which summon enemies throughout the boss because it ruins the one-on-one. I think there are like 2 bosses here that sort of need that. I'd say Crawfather's one of them because without that, I think Crawfather would be too simple and too easy to fight, and I don't think that really ruined the experience for me. I still like the fight. I like that one attack specifically where he bangs his head on the floor. I think that's funny. But other than that, I enjoyed the Crawfather fight. It really felt like fighting in an arena again. A lot of this actually just reminds me of fighting in an arena and fighting in, what was it called? The Coliseum of Fools? A lot of this reminded me. The Karmelita fight, the Crawfather fight, other fights we're going to talk about soon. They reminded me a lot of the Coliseum of Fools. The disgraced Chef Lugoli. Now, this guy right here, or chef, let me say, this chef right here took me 2 tries, I think. It wasn't awful. I will say, not a big fan of the attacks or just the whole warm mechanic where it stops you from healing and you have to heal to then get rid of the heal. I just think it could have been pulled off in a better way, like maybe instead of healing no mask, you at least heal 1 mask or something. I just think it's a very punishing mechanic for something that can happen so easily. But in the boss itself, I believe on my second attempt, I never got infected, I'd say, or whatever it's called. I never got hit by it once, I think. And not that I no hit the boss, it's just that stupid move where it throws out the balls and then you could get hit by it and get the maggots all over you. That never happened to me because I actually noticed it was very easy to dodge a lot of its attacks, specifically that one. I feel like most of the time when I did get hit on my first try, it was because I was just being impatient or I just didn't understand how the attack works. But once you get it, you can avoid it, you can never get caught by it, and then you could just defeat the boss easily. It wasn't too difficult, and I think the boss was alright. I think it needed those enemies that you see beforehand. I think the boss was overall enjoyable. I'd probably put him above maybe Moss Mother. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten to the worst boss, not in Silksong, not in Hollow Knight, but in gaming history. This guy gets an immediate F tier, Groal the Great. Or shall I say Groal the stupid dumb boss. And you might be wondering, no, actually, you're not even wondering why I'm saying that. You understand why I'm saying that. I know for a matter of fact that you viewer watching right now have struggled on this boss just as much as I did. Oh, but I actually no-hit this boss on my first try, and I used a bunch of tools, and I'm super good at the game. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You struggled on this boss. We all struggled on this boss. This boss has so much I do not like. Let's see where to start. First off, the run back is horrible. I remember when I fought this boss, I went online, and a lot of people had it much worse than I did. They went on that bench that was so far away instead of the bench right next to the boss. And I thought I thought I had it bad. I thought I had it bad, and I still do, because when you're trying to go towards the boss, right, you have to pass by like this really tight gap where you have to throw your needle to get past. And if you don't, you're falling into that maggot infested water and you're getting the stupid effect. On top of that, you have to like do some stupid weird platform all the way up, go all around to the left. You have to pass by a bunch of like those enemies that shoot the splinter thingy, and then you have to finally get to the arena. Oh wait, did I say arena? Yeah, that's right. You have to fight like a wave of 6 enemies, of 6 different enemies before getting to this boss. And I found out you could just like pogo on them. 4 pogos killed them for me, for each enemy, so I would just pogo on them to like hit him. And even though the arena wasn't too bad, it was annoying. What I didn't like about it was that it was annoying and that it took up a lot of time, and that sometimes I would accidentally fall into the maggot infested water and get infested, and I didn't like that. But then, finally, once all of that happens, you might have some soak, you might be at full health, the boss finally summons. And the boss itself is ridiculous. I saw this sort of valid complaint of the game a couple of days ago, where it said the boss, not the boss, just the enemies in general in this game deal a lot of contact damage, right? They deal a lot of close-up damage. So you might think, oh, I might have to stay away from this boss or this enemy. And the only way to kill them is by getting close. And it's kind of ridiculous in a sense, because you have to get close to kill this guy, right? But A, this guy flies. B, he flies over the maggot-infested water. C, he does a move that pulls you in towards him that allows you to fall into the maggot-infested water easily. D, he also has a move where he shoots 2 balls that could explode in your face. Oh, he could also jump randomly for some reason, ups, right? So you can't pogo him or else he'll jump into you. He'll fall into the water, rise out of nowhere, summon enemies, right? Bringing up the summoning enemies thing again. I do not like this. Why did he need to summon enemies? And a lot of times he summons those specific enemies that shoot the tranquilizers at you while also activating the ball spike thing from left to right. So you have to move into the corner, the ball spiky thing moves, but since you're in the corner, the tranquilizers are going to hit you. So you have to jump around them, but okay, either get hit by the tranquilizer or get hit by the ball. Like, pick your poison. And then after all of that, he has a second phase where he shoots fireballs from his mouth. And half of the time I can't tell, do I have to jump to avoid it or not? Because the hitbox is so weird. I died so many times because I would think, okay, I'm safe, I don't need to jump. And it was like 1 centimeter away from hitting me, and I would die. So I would think, okay, maybe I shouldn't get close to fight him, right? Oh, but if I don't get close, how am I gonna hit him? And it just took forever. This boss took me over 3 hours to fight. I'm not kidding. I almost dropped the game because of this boss. This boss almost made me quit playing this game. There are only 3 bosses in this game. I had to take a real life break to stop playing. To stop playing and fight back this boss. One of them was Karmelita. Karmelita was very difficult. I had to take a break in between. The other one was this guy right here. This guy broke my ego. He shattered my pride. He put me in the ground. And I was dead. And when I finally killed him, I felt nothing. You know what I felt? I felt stupid. Because a bench appears right where you kill him. And I was thinking to myself, damn, why couldn't I have that earlier? Why did that bench have to appear now instead of earlier? It would have made things so convenient. Yeah, this guy, I don't like him. Run back is horrible. The waves are horrible. His attacks are stupid. This is one of the bosses I'm just not looking forward to fighting. Is most of this because I might be bad at the game or because of my experience? Absolutely yes. But I don't think any other bosses are going to hit F tier other than this guy. On a more positive note, I guess, we have Sister Splinter. I've heard some people might have been struggling with this boss, which is surprising to me because I think I beat this boss either on my first or second try. I think it was my second try because I was struggling at first, and then I realized, oh wait, it just attacks, moves to the other side, attack, move to the other side, attack, and it was very simple. It had very simple mechanics in my opinion, especially because like you're meeting her sort of early on-ish in the game. You're still like, would you just leave Belheart? You're entering Shuttlewood. So it's not too bad. I believe people might have struggled with this boss because this is one of the bosses that is getting nerfed, which is surprising to me. I feel like Savage Beastfly probably deserves a bigger nerf than this Sister Splinter here. But overall, the boss was fun. I had fun. I'd probably put her above Father of the Flame. Before fighting Karmelita, I fought Shrine Guardian Seth first. And this might be a crazy take, but if Karmelita wasn't in the game, this would have been my favorite boss in the game. Now, for some reason, I felt really emotional during this fight. Emotional is a strange way to put it. I felt very somber, I'd say. There was something about this fight that was just weighing me down. The fact that, like, you know, there's this guardian here who promised to, like, guard this area, right? You first encounter him because you're trying to pass by, and he's like, wait. Sorry, gotta guard this area. You want to do this? Yes or no? So it's not even, like, going up to you, a savage Beastfly or whatnot, and just fighting. No, it's like respectfully saying like, hey, if you want to pass by, you gotta fight me. So you respect the 1v1, and he respects the 1v1. He doesn't like summon any enemies or anything, which is great. And you have to like react fast, move all over the arena. A couple people didn't like the fact that I think he could attack off screen. I didn't really mind that much. I didn't have much trouble with that. But I think what mostly made it for me was the music. The music in this fight was just phenomenal, because it wasn't like you were having this upbeat, super fast paced song like you usually do with these bosses. You have something that feels much more somber, sincere, hardening, I'd say, in a way, if that's a word I could use here. It's incredible, really. This fight was so good in my opinion, and I really like the second phase it had as well. I think it just matched it perfectly. And then while I was researching about this fight as well, I learned about why this fight is in the game. Apparently there was a real life person who was a huge fan of Hollow Knight, who unfortunately had cancer, and their wish was to meet up with Team Cherry. So they did, and Team Cherry allowed him to create a character to be put in the game. And when I learned about that and I realized why this boss made me feel this way, I was like, wow. Even without knowing the context, the amount of heartstrings Team Cherry was able to pull here was just incredible. This is, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest fights in the game. Not just because of the context behind it, but also because just, the one-on-one warrior feeling you have of Hornet against this guy. I don't know what it is about this fight. I just really love this fight. And I think it was really well made, well executed. I really love it. Up next, we have Nyleth, which is the second dream boss here. Or memory boss, I guess. Nyleth caught me off guard because I was expecting this to be sort of like a Hollow Knight situation. I kill the Guardian outside. I didn't even know we didn't kill Seth. You actually meet Seth later in the game, and then you have to like beat him at his puzzles. So I didn't know about that. I actually like that a lot as well, because it shows the difference between Hornet and the Knight, where the Knight would mostly just slay everything, while Hornet actually, has, I guess, more honor in a way, because she's able to have honor, because she has like these feelings. She's not hollow at all. So she has this honor against like warriors, and she lets them go instead of just killing them, even when they want to be killed, which I really appreciate about Hornet. But anyways, we're talking about Nyleth here, right? Nyleth caught me off guard because I didn't actually think we would fight a boss here. I thought it would just be like claim the heart and then move on. So fighting Nyleth was very surprising in my opinion, and a lot of people might not like this fight, but and I'll say it again, Reaper Crest is the best crest in the game, and it made this fight really fun. Once I learned the mechanics it had and how to avoid the attacks, I really loved this boss, and it took me a couple tries to beat Nyleth, but it was really worth it in my opinion. I could see a lot of people not liking this boss, understandably so, but I was one of the fellow few who actually enjoyed this boss, and as a matter of fact, I'll put her at low A tier. I believe this boss was pretty good. And here we have what most people might actually fight as the final boss of Act 1, Last Judge. Last Judge was, I'd say, even though I was getting my ass a little kicked here and there with other bosses like Savage Beastfly, or I think I might have struggled a little bit with Bell Beast, Last Judge was the first fight that actually made me realize how much I missed this type of game. And even though I haven't played games like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, which at some point I definitely will, I haven't had my ass beat at a game as much as Hollow Knight. And playing Silksong really reminded me of that feeling again, that like, I'm not getting babysit through this. I'm going to have to struggle, and I'm going to have to learn these mechanics, and I'm going to have to learn how to fight them. And I missed that a lot. And Last Judge made me feel this way, because Last Judge is one of those fights that if you walk in and you believe you're going to rush through it, right? You're going to tank all the attacks, you're going to hit him a lot. Most of the time, you're going to die. You're going to die a lot. I saw a video of a guy actually being able to tank a couple hits using the Beast Crest, I think. And using the Beast Crest, they just attack and attack and attack. And that could work to an extent. But in my opinion, most of these bosses, if not all of them, work best when you learn the boss mechanics and you pace yourself. Don't try to rush in and attack. You learn how to avoid these attacks. You learn when is the best time to attack, when is the best time to heal, and you pace yourself. Be patient, don't rush it. And Last Judge reminded me of this a lot. And Last Judge is, overall, I'd say it was a very good boss. It was very difficult. It was very challenging. It was worthy for a boss right before you enter the Citadel, because it also reminded me a lot of, like, you know, because of how mechanical feeling it looks and like the type of moves it does, I just think it would fit very well thematically as the final boss for the final act. The run back from the bench to the boss could have been better. It's not horrible, right? We've had worse, but I really like Last Judge, and I would probably put Last Judge at high A tier. I think Last Judge is a really, really good boss. I think I'd put Last Judge at the highest part of A tier, I think. Now here we have two versions of the Chudflies. We have the Great Chudflies and the Raging Chudflies. Now, just as a refresher, if you don't really remember these, one of them you fight at the lower part of the coral area, and you fight two of them at once. And then the other one, you fight them right before fighting the memory boss. And this guy, I guess, is Raging. I don't really remember a difference between the Raging one and the one where it's double. I don't think I like the Raging one as much, because the double one actually messed me up a lot, because it was, you know, you're fighting two of them at once. And it's a theme, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that a couple of the bosses in this game, like, you fight two of them at once, and both of them either have similar attacks or weapons or both. I think the Chudflies weren't that bad. They're just, you know, bigger versions of the enemies you've seen before, but it's not like a Skull Tyrant, Moss Mother, Bell Beast, no. But it's not like a Skull Tyrant, Moss Mother, Savage Beastfly situation. No, like, these guys actually, they even though they use the same attacks, they feel different, is the best way I could put it. So I'd probably put the Raging one at C tier, and then the double one at low B tier, I think, is fitting for it. Probably higher than the second Beastfly. And here we have the final memory boss, Crust King Khann. Crust King Khann was an interesting fight. At first, I felt just a tad bit disappointed, because you're fighting like these huge arenas to get all the way up to find him in the tower. And listen, when you enter that memory world and you throw your needle up for the first time and you go all the way up and you pass by that beautiful scenery, that is incredible. You're watching the kingdom in its prime right now. And then you enter the arena. I think I died near the end of the, like, there's two parts, right? There's the first part where it's a couple arenas, and the second part where it's one arena and the boss fight. I died right at the end of the first part. I came back later in the game after I defeated the other two memory bosses. But all that to say, I don't think the arena was difficult at all, actually. I'd say this was one of the easier arenas in my opinion. I actually didn't struggle much with this. It could be because I had basically full nail upgrade, almost full mask, almost full wool, silk since then. So it wasn't too difficult, but I really liked the arenas going up here. And what I like the most is that once you finish the arena, you're able to break this like thing to unlock the lower areas. So next time you die, instead of having to go through the whole arena again, you just climb up and then get to the boss. And I thought that was genius from Team Cherry's part. I was not expecting that whatsoever, and I applaud them for doing that. That said, you have to fight like a mini arena before getting to him, which it wasn't too bad. It's actually very simple in my opinion. It reminds me just as much as the Karmelita fight, and I think it was alright. But once you get to the actual fight himself, right, you go all the way up, he comes out of the shadows, and you fight him. Man, that is a really cool fight. Now listen, at first I was a little disappointed because I thought to myself that, oh man, you know, he moves his arm and it kind of goes in the attack goes in the way he's moving, and also like I think some particles show up so you know exactly where it's going. I thought to myself at first, wow, is that really it? All he's gonna do is just, you know, move the lines and then you just fight him like that? And to an extent, that's sort of all he does. But he also like does a couple of other stuff with like some of them falling from the ceiling, and then the X move is actually kind of hard to judge where it's going at times. And I think he has enough health to warrant how long the fight lasts. So overall, this is a very balanced boss that is actually kind of fun it's very fun to fight against, even though it's really simple. And I like it a lot too, because in a way it's like, he's moving his hand and then it takes a second and the thing comes and it's like he's commanding the thing to go there, because he's a warrior, he commands this to happen. So I think this was overall a fun fight that I would probably put above Nyleth in A tier. I believe this boss belongs in A tier, above Nyleth, probably above the Outcast. I might have to rearrange this for a sec. There we go. I organized the tier list a little, and I think this is exactly how I'd place some of the bosses, from left being the best to right being the least best, I guess. That said, we are currently 23 bosses out of 45. So that is a crazy number we're working with. Act 3 definitely has a lot of those more somber feeling bosses in a way, because you're fighting a lot of enemies that not enemies, I'd say, you're fighting a lot of allies that you've seen and grown throughout the game. And then now, things are getting serious, the world's about to end, they're having problems, you're having problems, and the only way they know how to put these problems to rest is to fight. So it's very unfortunate that you have to fight a couple of these enemies, and they make excellent bosses though, I will say. Watcher at the Edge is a very interesting boss. I didn't get it on this attempt. This is footage of me fighting him. I didn't get it on this attempt, but you can push them off the arena into the sand area and they can get damaged. And I think that's a very funny thing that you could do. But this boss is a little difficult, especially because it has that attack that goes up and then down, and then sometimes I can't really predict how far away I am from the boss and how far away I should be to avoid getting hit. But overall, this boss was pretty fun. Took me just a little bit of tries, like maybe 2 or 3, and I enjoyed the boss. I think it was very interesting. I'd probably put it like high C tier. It's actually crazy looking at this list. I'm putting this guy below below the Savage Beastfly, the second fight. Maybe I should. You know what? I think C tier. Should I move this? I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna be pissing off a lot of people with this tier list. I'll move them down. Voltworm. Now, interesting, called Voltworm, but worm spelled with a B instead of a W, not like, Pale King Worm. But Voltworm is a boss that I had to be reminded was a boss I fought. And I think that's as much as I could say for it. This will probably be the shortest entry I have. I have not much to say about it. I don't have much to say about it. I remember him, once I remembered that, like, oh yeah, you're right, it's that one. It wasn't hard. I didn't die. It was super easy to just, okay, now it's attacking here, move, alright, whatever. It was a simple boss. Second, Sentinel. I love this character, okay? I love this character because at first I was going around the, I just love the whole area of the Citadel. I was running around, and then I found like, a mechanical piece. Oh, this is very interesting. I wholeheartedly believed that the mechanical piece had something to do with the true ending. So I was definitely looking forward to like finding the other pieces. I was so wrong, but I had fun looking for the pieces, right? And then I get this mechanical heart, and I'm like, wow, what do I do with this? So I go to the architect, and the architect is like, all right, so let me take a look at this. Oh, it's, this used to once belong to an ancient warrior that was really good at fighting. It's very interesting that you found this. And then all of a sudden, when I'm exploring, like 5 minutes later, I find the warrior, and I'm like, whoa, is that where I placed the heart? And I thought we were gonna fight him like right there, right then, but instead, they're grateful that I brought them back to life, and they sort of leave. And then later, I find him like helping me fight one of the enemies, and I was like, whoa, they're so cool, I love them. And then, the third act hits, everything's going to chaos, and he just needs to clear their mind, and you go fight them, and wow, what an incredible fight it is. It wasn't too hard. I think I beat it third try maybe, but wow. I already loved Second Sentinel, right? Second Sentinel is my second favorite character right next to Sherma. Sherma's my favorite character in the game. I was very attached to this character, I'd say, because I thought this character had more to do with the plot than it actually did, but I loved collecting the pieces and then like putting it together and then bringing them back to life. And it really felt like, you know, that I did that, right? This character is here because of me, and I was able to give them this opportunity. And second Sentinels, it was just a fun fight overall, and I love that, like, when you fought second Sentinel and when you beat them, Hornet, like they're expecting to be slain, and Hornet's like, you know, you fulfilled your task. Like, your task was to see if I was a threat. We fought, I'm not, and you know, you did well. We could continue being alive as friends. And second Sentinel is like, yeah, as friends. And then, you know, later you could see second Sentinel like still fighting the enemies, and you could join on, and like you beat the enemies, like they bow and then they move on. It's very cool. I like how they fight with scissors as well. It's very interesting. I really like this fight. And when, you know, I was fighting the enemies, I noticed that like they're using the same moves they used against you in the boss fight, and I think that was super cool. I can't wait to fight this boss again in the Pantheon of Farloom, or whatever it's gonna be called in this game. I really like this boss. I put them high A tier. I wholeheartedly believe this is a high A tier boss. The Unraveled. This is one of the, I think, second to last bosses I fought in this game. The Unraveled was very unique in a sense, right? It was actually kind of scary. I was a little scared fighting this guy. When I mentioned earlier that there were a couple bosses that I believe benefited from having enemies included in their attacks, I believe this is one of them, because other than having the like enemies in the attack, this guy is a super simple boss. I will admit though, his hitbox is just a little weird. I got hit a lot sometimes because like I think I would fully jump over them, and then the next moment I get hit over like the stupidest hitbox, and I thought that was kind of dumb. But overall, I don't have much to say about this boss. I'd probably put him in like high C tier, better than I just find it funny that there's a couple of bosses I rank below the second Savage Beastfly fight. I just think that's funny. And here we get to one of the most fan favorite boss fights I've seen so far of this game, the GOATwork Dancers. Now, the GOATwork Dancers is an incredible boss fight that I fought, I think, on my 12th hour into the game, and it was the second day, right? It was like 6 in the morning. I had to go to class, but I had a couple of free time, so I pulled out my laptop, started playing some Silksong, and I fought this guy, and I thought to myself, wow, this is a difficult but incredible boss fight. Now I say difficult mostly because at first I didn't really realize that when it does the attack downward or at an angle, it actually, the hitbox isn't like fully down, it extends a little bit. So I was getting caught off guard by that a lot. But once you lock in with this fight, it's incredible. I am putting this fight at S tier. I fully believe that this fight is one of not just the best fight in the game, but one of the best fights from the series. And it was very fun seeing a lot of people like catch up to where I was in the game. I think that was like 4 or 5 days later, I start going on social media and I see a lot of people are finally getting to this part of the game, and they're like, wow, this boss fight is so cool, I love them so much. And I was like, heck yeah, you know, a little late to the party, but I love these guys. And overall, I love, you know, the different phases it has, whereas the first phase like simple, fast. The second phase, it's even faster. The third phase, you mix it up. Now it's one at a time. And then the last phase where it's just one of them, you know, they go in the center and they try to dance with their partner, but they're not there. Speaking of their partner, the lore behind these, this fight as well is just incredible. I really love this fight. Made me feel a little bit emotional at the end. It was an incredible fight from start to finish, and one that I would really love to fight again in the, I keep on saying the Pantheon of Farloom, but I assume there has to be something like that in this game. If they did it for Hollow Knight, there's no way they're going to skip on a huge opportunity for Silksong like that. Up next, we have Trobbio. Now, Trobbio, I'll talk about Trobbio and Tormented Trobbio back to back. This is a very interesting boss because I actually thought he had to do something with the Grim Troop, because it's very, you know, similar. You have a similar color palette, similar design, similar stage area, right? So I thought he might actually have something to do lore-wise with the Grim Troop, I think. But the soundtrack was good. The run back to the boss was good. I only died a couple of times. And what I might say is a little weird, but I think I will be placing regular Trobbio higher than Tormented Trobbio. I think regular Trobbio goes like A tier, and then Tormented Trobbio goes somewhere in B tier. And the reason I say this is because I've been overstimulated a lot recently, right? I would go downstairs and my roommates would show me this TikTok about a apple with a headset playing a game, watching another apple, and then all of a sudden one of them says 6-7, like now there's these colors and mustard everywhere. And I've just been getting a lot of overstimulated recently is what I'm trying to say here. And the Tormented Trobbio boss fight made me feel very overstimulated at times, okay? Because it would throw the balls, but at the same time, fireworks be appearing from the bottom, and then he'd just be going into his tornado, and it's like all these flashing lights and colors everywhere, and I'm just trying to like hold it in all together just not to get hit. Where in the regular Trobbio fight, while there are moments like that, it feels mostly chaotically controlled rather than chaotically explosive, if that makes any sense. Which is why I'll rank them exactly how they are. Plus, I don't think Tormented Trobbio was that difficult or different compared to regular Trobbio. I just think he had faster movements, harder attacks. But you gotta keep in mind, the first dude dealt like 2 damage most of the time. So when the second dude deals 2 damage all the time, I'm already expecting to lose 2 mass just by touching this guy. So that's a huge thing as well that I'll mention once we get to the latter half of these remaining boss fights. But I felt like a lot of the bosses in late game felt very underwhelming compared to bosses early game, mostly because 90, if not every single boss on this list, minus maybe Moss Mother, right? Maybe even Moss Mother has an attack that deals 2 mass. But most of these bosses, if not all of them, deal 2 mass damage. So by the time that you get to late game, when these bosses are supposed to be harder, yes, they're harder because they have very unique patterns and they move much faster, but I don't really feel it compared to when I did playing Hollow Knight. When I played Hollow Knight, you know, the bosses, they were pretty difficult. They dealt mostly 1 mass damage. When you fight the dream version of them, or when you fight the harder bosses late game, they start dealing 2 damage, right? It's getting serious now. But in here, they always deal 2 damage. So when you bring me Trobbio, who's dealing 2 damage, and then you bring in Tormented Trobbio, who's basically just a faster version of him with more chaotic attacks, it just doesn't feel that different because, you know, I already get dealt 2 damage from this guy. I already know most of his movement. I'm just not going to get hit. So it just doesn't really matter. I just think that's a complaint I have for most of the game, right? All this to say, I think there definitely is a weird difficulty curve, if you can even call it that. It doesn't more like a difficulty spike and then flat line from here on out in this game. But all this to say, I like Trobbio more than Tormented Trobbio. I won't stress much about the next 3 fights, mostly because there isn't really much to talk about them, right? We have Broodmother. I forgot I fought this boss to the point where when I was trying to complete the journal, I went back to the area where you fight this boss, and I was expecting to get a boss, but instead, nothing happened. It was like a little kid or something, and I was confused because I don't remember fighting this boss, and then I realized, oh yeah, I did do the wish. So this boss was very forgettable to me. I probably put them like lower than, I remember Skull Tyrant more than this guy. And this is one of the, I don't know if they count as bosses or not, they might have. Plasmified Zango is one of those fights that reminds me of like Moss Charger, right? Because he yells for a sec, a title card appears at the bottom left, like a label or a name or something. And then you don't really fight him, he just mostly shoots lifeblood. I'm not calling it plasma fire or whatever they call it in this game, it's lifeblood. That's what it's called, it's lifeblood. Shoots lifeblood and then sometimes crawls. I noticed that he wasn't dying that fast because you actually have to deal a lot of damage fast to kill him. I did like that. I did like that, you know, he used the lifeblood to his advantage to like not die that early. And I thought that was a cool mechanic. But outside of that, dude, this is like barely a fight. I remember this fight more than Broodmother, so I'd probably organize it that way. And Pale Stag is just another one of those bosses that make me question, is this really even a boss? All it does is just move the grass blades from left to right and teleport over the screen. Not very interesting. I almost died to it actually, and I would have been disappointed if I died to it because the run back in that whole Verdania area is very strange. I really thought there was going to be a bench in the dream world or something to allow me to at least go back to the bosses easier, but Lost Verdania, very cool place to explore. Would not be as cool if I died a lot in it, which I think I only died once or twice. Clover Dancers is an interesting boss that I'm going to rank in a place a lot of you guys might not agree with me. In my opinion, Clover Dancers probably belong in high B tier, and the reason I say this is because it is just a easier, not so difficult version of the GOATwork Dancers. Now, I say this because GOATwork Dancers is difficult, since by the time I got to him, I had maybe 5 masks, I don't remember, and I had only 1 nil upgrade, and it's just, there wasn't much going for me to make this boss easier. By the time I got to the Clover Dancers, I was already a very developed young Hornet. I was very good at the game. I knew a lot more about the mechanics. I knew what to avoid, and the fact that this guy borrows the same moves from the previous one, I already knew what to expect coming into this. As a matter of fact, I think the only move that actually changed is once they meet together in the center, they create a tornado. That was interesting. I wanted to see more of that, even though it was very difficult to move around in the first couple times. I wanted to see more of that in the boss, but instead it was just more or less the same GOATwork Dancers, just slightly difficult because you have to attack specifically one of them. But at the same time, that was sort of my strategy when I was fighting GOATwork Dancers. I don't really know if they have a shared health or divided health, but I would always target one of them instead of targeting both of them. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but me already doing that didn't really change much for this fight, as well as the fact that I think he only has 2 phases. The first phase is when they're attacking in unison. The second phase, they attack separately, which in my opinion, attacking separately is much easier than when they attacked in union. So I don't really know. This boss fight just wasn't that hard for me. I died only once. The run back was, I had to like walk all the way back in the dream world, go through all the areas, go back to him. It just wasn't that difficult. It just really wasn't. Bell Eater. Bell Eater is an interesting boss because I actually wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting that by the 3rd act you have to save the Bell Beast, which I really like actually. I like that, like, you know, the Bell Beast has been helping us so much. Now we do something in return. And the Bell Eater, I think, was a phenomenal boss. I might be crazy for saying this. I actually think Bell Eater is like low A tier. I really like fighting this boss. It beat my ass a little bit. The boss was very confusing with its, like, you know, butt attacks and the bombs bounce everywhere. But Bell Eater was fun to fight against. I liked Bell Eater a lot. And not just that, Bell Eater has a very interesting hue of red. A very saturated red, I'd say. Which, I don't know why. I like that color red that Christopher Larkin used for this boss. Oh, I forgot. At the end of the boss, the Bell Eater comes in, the Bell Beast comes in and like slays the Bell Eater. I thought that was sick. I think this boss is really good. I like this boss a lot. I'm definitely putting him in low A tier. This is the last questionable boss in a sense. There's the huge flea. I mostly put the huge flea here because I can't remember if there was like a label or card or whatever you call it when, like, you know, it says huge flea and then you fight the huge flea. All I remember was I met him, beat my ass once. That's enough for me to put him there. And then I realized, oh wait, this is actually a very simple, you know, enemy. It's not that hard. But I probably put him above these two because at least it was more challenging than this one. Not as challenging as this one. And at least I remember it compared to this one. At least it's not Groal the Great, so there's that going for him. With that, we are at the last, I think, 8 bosses to rank. And these bosses, I have quite some stuff to say about them. I actually think these 8 bosses are, I wouldn't say some of the best in the game, but they are definitely highlights in my opinion. First, we have the Lost Garmond. A very sad fight. I liked Garmond a lot. I thought he was a really cool character. So seeing him succumb to the void was heartbreaking to see. And at first I was confused because you find him, right, by walking through the you walk through the blasted steps and there's his buddy, and his buddy's like he's yelping for you. So you follow him and then you see like, oh crap, he's evil now. And you have to fight him. It's just in the Hornet's journal entry, she put, it's a sad, something along the lines of, it's a sad way to see a warrior go out like this. And I wholeheartedly agree. Now this boss was a little difficult, mostly because it was using, you know, those void attacks where it shoots out the weird balls that turn into saws, or it shoots out that beam that goes in threes. So it was difficult mostly because it dealt 2 damage. So I would say it was artificially difficult in a way. Like if it only dealt 1 damage, the boss wouldn't kick my ass as much as if it dealt 2 damage. But it was still a fun boss to fight overall, and a very sad one for that because I love this guy a lot. It was very sad to see that he died. And when you kill him, you could do your needle song and the bug would sing for you. And it was very sad. So I'd probably put this guy at high B tier, probably above the Clover Dancers. Actually, I felt more sad for this boss fight than I did with the Clover Dancers, so I'd probably put him up there. Here we have the Pinstress. I like the Pinstress mostly because I really wanted to fight on Mount Fae, and I can't remember if there was a fight on Mount Fae. I don't believe there is. So we finally got that fight here. And this fight was actually one that I thought it was too easy, but then it started kicking my ass a little, and then I realized, you know what, this was a fun boss fight. It has those attacks where it goes in 3s, it moves around quickly. It's a lot of reaction is needed for this fight. And overall, I don't have much to say for it. I will place him probably high B tier, above, like, right there, I think. Right there is very fair for the boss, I'd say. I like Pinstress a lot. I hope you agree with me on this one, but I fully believe that Widow is an S tier boss. Widow is an incredible boss in this game. I think it took me 3 tries to beat Widow, so it wasn't too bad. The run back isn't that bad either. I couldn't find a bench right next to Widow, so I had to go all through the bell area. Hopefully there was a closer bench maybe, but this fight is really, really good. Before Last Judge, I'd say, this was one of the fights that reminded me what I loved about Hollow Knight so much. This the fact that, like, you know, Widow can go all around the floor, start using its weird silk attacks, and then, like, it has the second phase where it's even faster, and then by the time you kill it, you stick your needle in Widow, and you take its power. I just think everything about this fight is really good, and that theme, man, that theme is so good. Christopher Larkin did an amazing job on that theme, and I just think this boss fight is incredible. And alongside Widow, I have heard really good things about First Sinner. Before getting to this boss, I've heard phenomenal things that people love this boss, their favorite boss in the game, and I think I would have enjoyed this boss much more if I fought them earlier on. Because the issue is, I fought this boss when it had full nail, all mask, all spools. So this boss wasn't that challenging for me, I'd say, because I was able to tank a couple of hits and heal very fast and have some of the best weapons and crests and items in the game, so I didn't struggle a lot. I feel like I would have loved this boss so much more if I actually was able to meet them earlier on or meet them in the slab. I don't know if it's possible because I think you needed a key to see them. I wouldn't say this boss was overhyped. I just think under different circumstances, I would have loved this boss a lot more than I did when I fought him. However, that said, this is a very fun boss to fight, and I think the reward you get from beating this boss is pretty good. I like the theme. I like everything after defeating the boss, like the little sequence that happens afterwards. And just fighting the boss itself, it was actually a fun experience, even though I didn't struggle much at all. I think it took me 2 attempts. I really liked fighting this boss, and it was very unique. That's the best way I could put it, and I liked it a lot. I'd probably put First Sinner above Gurr the Outcast, I think. Phantom. Now, I don't know how many of you people know this, but apparently if you go through Sinner's Road and then enter that one area of Bilewater, you're able to actually fight Phantom during Act 1, and if you beat Phantom, you enter Act 2 right after. I think that's very interesting because I thought to get into Act 1, you have to fight Last Judge, ring the 5 bells. But apparently there's this whole other option of going through it with a whole different experience, which fighting a boss that I think serves better when you're fighting them later in the game than Act 1. Overall, I think this is a very unique and fun boss to fight against. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe the reason you could fight this boss so early on is because it's like a speedrunner thing. This game is actually really huge, so maybe it's better for speedrunners to actually fight Phantom, even though it's harder to get to Phantom and then probably harder to fight Phantom than Last Judge that early on. Because I was like, what, in the middle of Act 2, and I got to Phantom, and I was struggling a little. I didn't die a single time I beat Phantom first try, but I was struggling a little. I almost died a couple of times during their fight, mostly because Phantom's just very fast and moves a lot and deals 2 mask, just like everyone else. But Phantom was a fun boss to fight against, and even though I can't remember too much about it because I fought him kind of early on, I still think this boss was an enjoyable experience that I'd probably put like right here in A tier. I think I like this boss a lot. I remember loving it a lot when I first fought it, and that scene you get similar to when you fought Widow and you killed Widow, where you like stick your needle in Phantom and then absorb it. I think that's really cool, so I'm putting it in A tier. Now we have Lace 1 and Lace 2. I'll talk about these two simultaneously because they're pretty much sort of the same. Lace 1, I think, belongs as the highest B tier boss, and I'd say that because I thought it was a little easy. I remember when the demo came out, I heard that like some people were struggling against Lace, but it mostly had to do because they were struggling trying to learn the mechanics of the game while fighting a boss like this at the same time. But when I fought Lace 1, it was actually very easy. I beat Lace 1 first try, almost no problem, and I was like, wow, that's it. And I also noticed that when you check the journal entry, it says beat Lace 1 more time to get this journal entry. So I was like, okay, we're gonna fight Lace at some point eventually, and then, you know, have our rematch. And then when we actually had a rematch, I was like, whoa, you know, there's Lace. I wasn't expecting this. Okay, let's do this. And Lace kicked my ass. I'm talking about Lace 2 was a fun fight. I enjoyed Lace 2 a lot. This boss took me about an hour and a half to beat, but the only thing I didn't like about this boss was the fact that every time you die, you have to like watch the super slow cutscene of going up the elevator and then fighting it. Other than that, Lace 2 was an incredible fight that I'd probably put high A tier. I'd probably put it above Last Judge. I think Lace 2 was very fun to fight against. Not much else I have to say about that, but just the whole dance rhythm, and every time Lace kills you, Lace laughs. It's just fun. It's a fun fight. Grandmother Silk, the final boss of the game. Now, this might just be me, but when I fought Grandmother Silk for the first time, I actually thought this felt like a Terraria boss. You know, it's attacking in lines and patterns and moving up and down. I thought this felt a lot like a Terraria boss, but I was also a little confused because I didn't know what was going on with the story. If I'm being honest, I still don't know what's going on with the story, but seeing that like Grandmother Silk had a title card, I thought to myself, oh, maybe this is really the final boss. And it reminded me of like when I played Hollow Knight for the first time. I didn't know who the Hollow Knight was, so when I fought the Hollow Knight and I beat it, I was like, oh, that's it, that's the ending. I kind of felt the same way here, where like once I beat Grandmother Silk, I was like, oh, that's it, that's the ending. And it's probably something I'll understand and appreciate more once I actually understand and appreciate the lore itself. But for seeing this boss for the first time and fighting it and beating it, it reminded me a lot of Hollow Knight in a sense. I didn't really like the run back too much because you have to do some stupid platforming to get up there, but I can appreciate that you have to challenge it, wait like 15 seconds to actually fight it, and then once you fight it, the boss is a little bit disappointingly easy. Its attack patterns are just very common and easy to dodge. It's very easy, especially when you have double jump. You could avoid mostly everything extremely easy. And even the second phase, even though it's more chaotic, as long as you stay patient and learn the moves, like how the scissors will always attack in threes. Most of the time it'll attack in threes, so you could easily find a place to heal or dodge out the way to attack Grandmother Silk. There's just a lot of this boss that I feel like was a little bit too easy. It is one of those bosses that I think only Grandmother Silk and Lost Lace can deal 3 damage at once using a very specific move. But it is just one of those bosses that unfortunately I wish was just a little bit harder. Maybe she is harder when I speedrun the game, because I actually think I'd love to speedrun the game. At first I thought, no, this game wouldn't be that fun to speedrun or enjoyable to play again. But once I got to late game, I realized it was just a skill issue thing, and I would love to speedrun this game. So maybe once I speedrun this game, Grandmother Silk becomes more challenging because less attack, less health. But overall, I just wish it was a little more difficult. I still liked her regardless. I'd probably put her like high A tier. I think seems fair for Grandmother Silk. I'd probably put her around maybe the above Trobbiooooooos and Belt Eater. Yeah, let's put her there. I think that's sort of a fair ranking for her. Now we get to the final boss of Hollow Knight Silksong's true ending, Lost Lace. Now I won't lie, at first, just like with Grandmother Silk, I was a little disappointed with this boss, but disappointed for different reasons. Lost Lace was a little challenging for me. I mentioned earlier there were only 3 bosses that made me take a break. This is the 3rd boss, mostly because it was actually very late at night and I just wanted to get some sleep, so I did. But when I woke up, I played for like an hour-ish and then I finally beat Lost Lace. So it took me about maybe an hour or 2. I think it took me less time to beat Lost Lace than Lace 2. But overall, at first I was a little disappointed because I thought that, oh, you know, that's it. You just fight Lace. Lace goes into second phase and then that's it. But at the same time, there was something very important I had to remember. And it's that this is not Hollow Knight, right? This doesn't have to be Hollow Knight. It doesn't have to be Hollow Knight where you fight a phase, starts into a completely different fight, and then it ends in this super thematic attack and everything. This isn't that. This is a completely brand new and different experience. And when I tried viewing this fight through that lens, I was able to appreciate Lost Lace much more. Especially thematically as well, considering that the Void is something that Hornet has fought against before and seen firsthand. Now consuming what's basically, I believe to be Hornet's sister, and her succumbing to this despair and corruption, and you're trying to beat this out of her. Thematically, the fight is very good, and I like the fight a lot. I don't know if I like it as much as the second Lace fight, and the reason I say that is because the second Lace fight actually kicked my ass. I did not know Lace was smooth like that. I did not know she would go around and jump, and I didn't know she had that in her. So I was more caught off guard with the second Lace fight than with Lost Lace, because what made Lost Lace mostly difficult, I'd say, is that Lost Lace is very quick, right? Like when you are able to usually attack Lace for a second in her first or second fight, in Lost Lace she moves back extremely fast. She could just disappear, appear anywhere, and then specifically those tentacle attacks and the void attacks she have, they make her a much more difficult boss. But I still think I enjoyed Lace 2 more than I enjoyed Lost Lace. However, as a final boss of the game and just wrapping the whole story up together, I really think I like Lost Lace. Looking back to it now, I liked her a lot more than when I first experienced it, and I believe that the more I play the game, the more I replay this fight, and the more I learn about the story, the complete story at least, I'll start to understand and appreciate Lost Lace more than I feel now. So for now, I will be placing Lost Lace at probably better than Grandmother Silk, like right here. I'll be placing Lost Lace right here. It was a very challenging fight. Thematically, I enjoyed it. It just felt a little different to Hollow Knight, but that's good. It had to be different, right? A lot of this was different from original Hollow Knight, and I think that's a good thing. With all of this said, this is my Hollow Knight Silksong bosses tier list. Feel free to screenshot, feel free to make fun of me in the comments, and feel free to try your own tier list. I'm gonna link this in the description below so you could attempt your own, and hopefully you enjoyed listening to me rant about Hollow Knight Silksong bosses for an hour and 30 minutes straight. There was definitely a lot I wanted to get on the table, specifically with this game, because at first, if I'm being honest, right, like now I'm just gonna start talking a little bit about the game in general and just my personal opinions on it. At first, while I was playing this game, I acknowledged it for how well it looked and how amazing it felt to feel. But there was a part of me that said, I'm not really looking forward to replaying this game on Switch. And the more I played through this game, the more that feeling went away. It really took me a little bit to finally kick in to that Hollow Knight feeling I once had playing the original game. But once it kicked in amazingly well. This is a game that you have to give it time to fully develop your feelings on it and understand how it feels. The more I played this game, the more I fell in love with it, and the more I appreciated about the game. And going back to Hollow Knight, because earlier I was playing a bit more of the original Hollow Knight, specifically going to some areas, fighting some bosses, and it made me realize how much better Silksong's changes are to the Hollow Knight formula than they were in the first game. I never noticed just how fun it felt grabbing on ledges and being able to sprint. And Silksong did so much different to Hollow Knight, which on some sides might be a good thing, might not, but I think most of the changes made in this game were for the better. And the game is just huge. There's so much to explore. I'm 55 hours in the game, and right after this, I'm going to bed actually, and then I'm going back on the game to finish the journal. I'm not even done yet. I'm like, what, 80% done with the game? It's incredible just how much there is in this game and how much has changed, but also how much has stayed and just how well they all work together. All this to say, the bosses in this game are phenomenal. Looking back to the bosses in this game compared to the bosses in Hollow Knight, I think the highest of the highs here definitely outshine the highest of the highs there, except for Groal the Great. That said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. I have a couple social medias, Discord server, all linked in the description below. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed Silksong just as much as I did, and I'd love to make more Silksong content in the future. I have very high hopes for the DLC in this game, and I'd love to see what Team Cherry will continue cooking up for the future of this game in the franchise, so I can't wait.